I am back out in the woods today, and I'm hinge cutting several trees to help create a better, more suitable habitat for the wildlife. Hinge cutting these trees and falling them overlapping one another will create a better bedding area where the deer will feel more comfortable bedding down and sleeping, and it'll also create some nice nesting area for the turkeys. Hinge cutting live trees is not something that I'm used to doing. I'm used to cutting dead trees down for firewood because that's my main source of heat for my farm. So trying to cut these trees down and have them stay attached on a hinge is a new concept for me, but something that I know I can figure out because I cut so much wood. What I learned real fast is that the trees that I went through and marked didn't always fall the way that I intended for them to do, and they didn't always go right down to the ground. Sometimes the trees would hang up in the branches of other trees, so I would end up having to cut trees down just to get the ones that I hinge cut to come down to the ground. This was not a big deal for me. Once I figured this out, it was pretty easy, and most of the trees came down with a domino effect. The ones that were hung up would come down once I got the right tree that they were hung up on cut into the ground. What this meant for me was some of the trees that I marked with orange, I did not end up cutting this time around, and others that I did not mark ended up having to come down. You can see already with just a few trees how much thicker this area gets, and once these trees leaf out, it'll make the deer so much more comfortable. This is a view right here of the part of the woods that I have not cut yet. And here, this thick bunch in the back is the part that I already cut. So if I was looking to hide in the woods, I would definitely pick the area that I've already cut. This is an example of a hinge, and the part that's still attached to the tree there, that's going to continue to pump nutrients through that tree and keep it alive for 4 or 5 years. So this tree will continue to leaf out, it'll grow branches straight up and create some nice thick cover for the wildlife in this area. This is how a hinge cut kind of works. You want it to definitely go slow, because the slower it falls, the less likely the tree is to snap on you. So see, there's a little piece connected there, and that little piece is going to keep that whole tree alive. Now I'm trying to cut this in 3 main parts. All 3 parts are along the back edge in the back part of my woods, but I don't want this whole bunch of trees falling together. I want 3 nice bedding areas where the deer feel comfortable coming and going from, and if I have it split up a little bit, my thought is it'll make it easier for the deer to travel between each section, giving them a good entrance and escape route from the front, the sides, and the back of these trees. You can see here some of these trees hang up on one another like I mentioned earlier, but once I get the right trees cut, they all just fall exactly how I want them to. I will say that I would not recommend doing this without the proper gear. I should be wearing chaps, I should be wearing a hard hat. I have all of that stuff in the garage, but I'm stubborn and I forgot it and I'm not going back up to the house for it. And you'll see in many of my videos, I end up out here in the woods without any of my protective gear on. And so far, I've been very lucky and not had any injuries. You can see here multiple trees coming down at the same time, and that's exactly how the majority of these cuts went. I'm going to show you now a dangerous cut here. You can see how this tree snapped back exactly where I was probably going to be standing had I not expected it. That's called a barber chair when that tree snaps back where you're standing at. It's extremely dangerous and can happen very fast and catch people off guard, smack them in the head, and injure them severely or even kill them. You can see here off to the side that entire tree trunk is hanging right where I would have been standing. And if that would have been a huge tree and I not expected it, it would have gone right into my head. So you really have to be careful and safe when you're out here doing this kind of stuff completely alone like I am. Most of these trees came down really well for me, and almost all of them, with the exception of maybe 2 or 3, have a nice hinge on them. I learned that beech trees don't hinge very well, and the bigger the tree, the less likely it is to have a hinge on it because of the weight of the tree splitting right down to the ground and snapping the trunk off at the base. But overall, this looks really good, and for my first try, I can't wait till this spring to see how this turns out. This is the third section that I'm cutting here right now. I'm going to try to fall the trees so it makes this nice path right here through the middle of the section. And I'll show you that path later. I'm trying to make sure that the deer and wildlife are comfortable moving through these areas. So now that I have a little path through here, I'm actually going to go through and trim the branches. If I cannot travel through this, a deer cannot travel through this very easily. So this would be a bedding area in the back, a bunch of branches that are going to leaf out this summer and hopefully hold those leaves into the early fall. And then as I swing around, you can see the path right up through here. And there's trees that are hinged on either side that'll have lots of leafy cover on them with an escape route for the deer. I'll probably come back through here tomorrow or in a couple days, and I want to clean this up a little bit more, maybe take down a couple more trees. One thing that I've learned in this woods is if I make a path for the deer to go through, they're going to follow it. So there is section 1 of this deer cover. It's nice and thick. I can't wait to see that leaf out a little bit, and with that exposure to the ground from the sunlight, hopefully a lot of ground cover will grow up as well. Here is the second section. This is in the middle of the back of the woods. Again, really nice and thick. Something could lay down in there and hardly be seen. And then here is the third section. I was going to cut that great big leaner there, but there was no good way of getting it down, and I wasn't about to exhaust myself fighting with it when it's hung up on that big tree so well. So now I'm going to pan over the entire back half of the woods here. If you saw the first video, you've seen how open this was. You could see across the ground right out into that field, and now it's nice and thick in that back half in all 3 of those sections, and hopefully this will help hold some deer and maybe even some bucks will feel comfortable bedding down here this fall. Some turkeys will nest in this area. Overall, I don't think I hurt anything in the woods. I think that I only helped improve the wildlife habitat, and I can't wait to check in this spring.